Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, boils and goyles. Today, I'm going to talk about an album from my personal collection. When around, I want to say like 2013, I was on this website. It was called Noisy. You may have heard of it. And there was an article that I found kind of interesting that was talking about how emo is back or something like that. And they talked about a few bands that I had never heard of. A band called Snowing, and another one called Into It, Over It, which I thought was kind of a lame and kind of a cool name for a band. Anyhow, a year or so later, I was in Minneapolis, and I stopped at this record store that I had never been to before, and I bought a couple of records. And one I got brand new, and it was pretty cheap. I want to say I paid like $11 for it or something. Anyway, that's what I'm listening to right now. It is Proper by Into It, Over It. And it's got this very kind of poppy, indie-ish, kind of emo type rock music. This guy, Evan something, he's in a bunch of different bands. He was in There with Mike Kinsella. And the only album I've ever listened to by Into It, Over It was this one, is Proper. There, that's better. That's the right way. And there's one song in particular on this album. In fact, I was just listening to it. First on side B, called Connecticut Steps. That's pretty good. A favorite of mine. You know, if you're a fan of that indie type stuff like Owen or American football, Mike Kinsella stuff, you know, you might like this one. It's a solid album. Like, you know, for the price, it was totally worth it. And it's something that I don't normally listen to. This more like poppy side of indie rock. Almost has like a pop punk type feel to it. This guy's clearly talented. I know he's a multi-instrumentalist. I want to say he played everything on the album, although I'm not positive. I guess he often plays bass in bands. And if you like that kind of stuff, that whiny type rock and roll stuff, you might like Proper. I don't know that I've ever looked at these inserts before. There's lyrics inside. Did you read that real quick? Yeah, you know, I do have some indie rock. Not a ton, but some. Would I buy another Into It, Over It record? Probably not. If I did eventually hear one and loved it, then yeah. And maybe if I were shopping and came across one and it was like really cheap, you know, sometimes I have a hard time turning down a good deal. So, yeah, it could happen. But odds are, no, I probably wouldn't buy another Into It, Over It record. I like it. It's just I try not to clutter my collection of records. I've got sort of a new policy of I'm probably not going to buy something, especially not seek something out, unless it's something that I love. There are certain records, or even just a record by certain artists, that I'd like to have in my collection. And that's the kind of records I will buy now. CDs I might be a little more liberal about. I don't buy a lot of CDs anyway. But I don't want to add a lot of clutter. I have enough records for me. My policy has always been, I'm not going to buy a record that I don't know I'm not going to listen to. I will buy a record and keep a record that I enjoy. And at this point, I have enough to where I don't have, by record collector standards, I don't even have a lot of records. But I really only want stuff I love now. You know, I can think of certain records or certain bands where I'd like to have something from their au revoir. When I bought this record over a decade ago, I listened to it quite a few times. Yeah, after I bought it, I listened to it a number of times. It's not a long album. And then a few times later. I haven't heard it in a while, though. Probably haven't put this on in a year or two. How about that?